minutes from December 19th.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Minutes have been approved. Okay, school community chairperson comments. I don't have any comments tonight. I'm pinch hitting here for Bill. So I think we can go ahead and move on to community comments. All right, anybody in the room have any comments? Okay. Anybody online raising their hands? All right. Moving along, I'd like you to speak.
Before we move on,
Yes.
I just want to make my statements. So my wife is a teacher at Mendon Elementary. Today on the agenda, she's leading presenters for the data presentation. Where there's comments, just to make sure that this doesn't constitute conflict of interest. I'm disclosing that conflict, and otherwise I can participate in discussions.
Excellent. All right, thanks, Matt. All right. Well, with that, why don't we move on to student comments? I think we're going to start with the Miscall Hill students Best Buddies programming.
Excellent.
Great.
So thank you for having us. Our Best Buddies program at Miscall is new. Thank you to the support of our central office staff and two of our fellow educators at Miscall, Ms. Ishler and Ms. Azam. And I'll introduce our students to you. We have Callie. You guys can just raise hands and give a wave.
Which one?
Callie with a K. Callie with a C.
Anna with an A.
Annabelle with an A. Dice, Audrey. Carly. And. Kayla. Excellent. Thank you all for being. So they're going to talk to you a little bit about Best Buddies with the support of our slides. I would kind of act as moderator and ask some guiding questions while you are all previewing their slides there. So anybody want to talk to us about what you feel Best Buddies is? What's it all about?
Best Buddies to me is where a group of people come together and they all are buddies, and you form special relationships with people that you thought you might never have, and that's what it means to me.
Excellent. You just want to add to that?
It's like kind of making like a special connection and meeting a friend that you never thought you could be friends with.
Absolutely. Nice to know. And what does being a best buddy mean to you?
To me, it means making a commitment for a very long time and not stepping out of your commitment, and it's being really kind of a person who's willing to help make the school a better place and help make people feel more welcome.
You want to add to that? We talked a lot about what Best Buddies is and what it isn't. Does anybody want to expand on what Best Buddies is?
Best Buddies is like being friends with somebody, like not like saying like, oh, I'm going to Best Buddies so that everybody will be friends with me, and like she's my buddy, or he or whoever is my buddy, not yours, and I'm the only one who can be friends with you.
What else? You're gonna have to break thoughts.
It's also not like dating them, it's having fun with them and like learning from each other. And if some people have like different abilities, you can find different ways to communicate.
Carly, I know you're dying. Anything? Okay. Annabelle, do you want to talk about what you like about Best Buddies?
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. You know what I mean?
It's awesome and big. And we play. And play in the games with Alex and we
My favorite thing too. Right? Favorite thing to do with friends. Yes, you guys are good buddies, right? And then we also had a pretty rich conversation, robust conversation around what Best Buddies is not. So if you go next. Would you guys come up with what Best Buddies is not? I think we alluded to this a little bit, yeah.
It's not like babysitting them. It's not watching them. It's like genuinely being friends with them, like any other kid.
Mhm. Yeah, well said.
and it's not something we should like not like going to. It can be something we should look forward to and like have fun doing.
Absolutely. Audrey, anything you have?
What I like about Best Buddies is how it can really help with school and forming those bonds and those friendships. It's like it can make school a lot less stressful and as an eighth grader, like joining high school.
Talk a lot about those transitions, right? All the support it needs to have friends when you're doing transitions. Nice job. Anything you guys want to add that we didn't bring up? So in working with this group, I just was so impressed by the fact that everybody here tonight and even the members who are not here tonight are in it for the right reasons. Like they really see how this enriches their life and adds value, and they truly are just great friends. And it's awesome to see. So thank you all for presenting.
We have
Mrs. Zisler.
currently 37 members.
37 members.
Let's go. And
25 or 27 at high school.
yeah, at high school. So it's really great.
For first year.
Yeah, for first year, it's wonderful. We're hoping that we can move on and do some things outside of school. So it's just really nice and it's really exciting and it brings smiles to our faces, right? And everybody's just wonderful. It's a great community and it's nice to be a part of.
And these guys are role models at our schools for what true friendship looks like. So we really appreciate them.
Yeah.
So what do you guys do in a session or you get together once?
Actually, if you click on a couple slides, we have Taylor and Annabelle,
Lunch together.
right?
A lot of our buddies have lunch together.
Yeah.
Every day, which is really nice.
And you can go on to the next one. And we meet once a month as a large group, so that's 5 through 8. And we do activities together. So what did we do this year? I mean, this past session. Go ahead, Carly.
Gingerbread houses.
Gingerbread.
Oh, awesome.
Yep. And there's one more slide. Just to
There's
show
no
you.
more with the gingerbread houses.
So we just got started. This is our first year up and running. November, we had our first meeting with the neurotypical development buddies. And we just talked about what it is to be a best buddy. And then the next one in December was when we met as a large group and we made gingerbread houses together. It was great. We had a lot of fun.
Yes.
And then
Raise your hand if you might have eaten some of the decorations.
And then we meet actually next week.
Yep.
For our next session. I know. What are we doing, Carly? Making slime. We're making slime. Her favorite. Carly, I mean, Callie actually had that idea, right? Yeah. Yeah. So and we're hoping that as it goes on, we'll be able to do some outside activities, going like to a bowling alley and bowling together and stuff like that. So but that's the spring. I mean, we met with people over the summer for Best Buddies to really get it going and everything. And these guys just jumped on right away. These 4 are total role models, Best Buddies. It's exactly what a Best Buddy needs to be. So
What was your favorite activity so far?
You have a lot of recess dance parties as well.
Oh,
Recess.
Yes. Yeah,
we like to dance.
That's my favorite activity.
What did you say it about?
I'm going to say my Lady Gaga.
Lady
Oh,
Gaga.
yeah.
Proud favorite, right? You like Lady Gaga. Yeah.
Any other questions? Great, thank you.
Really cool.
Thank you.
You would have one day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
It's really the love side.
Yes.
And I love you.
Great. All right. We get to move on. You guys got to come back to follow once again. Your normal spot. You guys go ahead and get something going on in the high school.
Okay, so, this week on November 12th, mostly underclassmen and a handful of juniors and seniors are competing in this school year's first DECA competition located at the DC Youth Center. A lot of preparation has gone into making sure everyone is comfortable and trying their best and showing off what skills they've learned in business class this year. I know it's one of my favorite days and I look forward to it every year, especially now that I'm not competing and I can fly on the wall and just watch how it all works. So I'm really excited for that and I'm looking forward to. And then I have an update on Thursday, January 19th. We have Science and Engineering Research Symposium at the Mendon-Upton Museum, and it's from 8 to 11. And it's for all the students in evening classes or just science classes who will have creative projects, and they'll be showing it off there. So we hope to see everyone there. 8 to 11.
Thank you. All right, I think Dr. Cohen, it's on to you.
I'm gonna follow up with more activities taking place in the district. So a few more at the high school. Tomorrow night, Nipmuc Regional will be hosting their showcase. So for family and students who are interested in learning more about the amazing activities and learning that and programming that takes place here at the high school, I would definitely recommend you come and check it out. They usually will start in the auditorium. And then they'll send everyone off throughout the building, and there's lots of different presentations that take place in the hallways and in the building as well. So there's a lot to learn, and I definitely recommend it. We also have our financial literacy fair taking place at Nipmuc on Friday, and it consists of sophomores and junior students who are choosing a career. And basically it's like the game of life. They choose a career and then they walk through the process based on their salary. They create a monthly budget. Maybe I'll show up and try this out again. But I wonder if do you think superintendent is one of but anyways, I'll check it out, but it's great. We've been doing it for quite some time, and every year we add more elements to it. Students go booth to booth, they interact with different community partners that we have, and they try to make smart financial decisions. So they'll be deciding on what phone plans they'll have. Sometimes that's one of the things. You remember doing it? Maybe they didn't do it with student experience because we did it before. So yeah, good. So you'll at least get to do that. So it's great. It's also we want to thank our seniors who were involved, Ava Whitney, Erica Duplessis, and Risa Montana, who are assisting with the literacy fair as part of their DECA project. We also have set our kindergarten information nights for the week of January 23rd. And so they will be, one night will be at Clough, one night will be at Memorial, and then communications are going out this week in regard to that, but we also follow with the Spanish immersion information night, which will be on Thursday, February 2nd. The 2 kindergarten information nights will be in person this year, but the SI night will be virtual, which we find works out well. And our Inspired Learning Planning team is excited to announce that their Inspired Learning Design Challenge will be taking place on Thursday, February 9th. The team's been working, and we started the week off with a couple hours of the planning team working together. All of our students in the district will have an opportunity to take a zip line challenge that they're working on, and they'll be able to explore, apply, and reflect on their personal connections to the MURC Portrait of Learner on that day through this hands-on collaborative STEM challenge. More info to come, but wanted to let everybody know we're looking forward to that and working on that. Any questions? All right, so I'm excited about strategic planning committee. We are launching our strategic planning committee. I know we've talked about it that for quite some time that we've been. This is the year that we are going to be doing a lot of work starting in January for that committee. So we sent out in December in the newsletter to parents. Another one's going to go out just to remind people and community members to sign up. I shared it with you as well in here, so you could take a look at it and you can sign up as well and send it out. And I'll continue to send it out to our staff members as well. And I'm working with principals at the middle school and the high school to determine some dates and also some student members from the high school. But basically, I give you in here the draft schedule. The meetings are going to be taking place on Mondays, 4 to 6. They're not going to be on school committee meeting days, so they're opposite of school committee meeting days. The first meeting will be scheduled for Monday, January 30th. Second one is February 13th, and that's from 4 to 6. It will be in here. Some of those nights we have CPAC that follows at 6:30, so we just want to make sure we get out before that meeting that takes place. I give you the draft schedule. It will make some changes and adjustments as we go, but that pretty much outlines our path for the strategic planning work that we'll be doing in the committee. And the only thing that I haven't set yet, I need to work with the principals this week. I'm just setting up focus group time. So we'll have focus groups where I'll go to the different buildings, meet with staff, and also have a couple forum focus groups on visioning and SWOT analysis type of activities with members of the community as well. So that will be between that first meeting in January and that February meeting. And one of something, I don't have it open, but the third meeting is when we start to share out some of that feedback. So we have that's part of our work. So I don't know if you have any questions on that, but just want to lay that out there and just reach out to the community. We usually have about no more than 30 people on that working committee, but we have representatives. It's important for us to have a wide range of representatives across the whole district. In the end, when we put it together. And we will be using the information that's in the survey feedback form that people submit to just right off the bat when we're getting started. Budget development process. So we have a budget subcommittee meeting that was scheduled for this Thursday. We'll be taking a look at all of the initial requests that are coming in. As we have different groups coming forward, you'll start to hear some of their requests, but we'll talk about that as a group on Thursday. And at our, just to let you know, at our next school committee meeting, you'll hear from the elementary schools and as well as our student support services. The meeting after, we're scheduled to have the technology department as well as our facilities and athletics. Sometimes something comes up and we may swap a meeting based on people's schedules, but that's the timeline that we've drafted so far on that process. And Jay and I and others, other department leaders are spending lots of time reworking and going through the budget requests and refining it before we come forward with our initial first ask. I'm going to call any questions on those 2 topics.
Have you heard back from many of the others on the budget committee for the towns?
No, but that's a good reminder. So I'll send that out
Okay.
and just see and make sure that we can have some representatives.
Right.
So yeah, thank you for that reminder.
Yeah.
So Jay, if you don't mind coming up. Chase, you're gonna do behind this door. It's gonna give some highlight every month. We're trying to continue at the first meeting of every month to have a year-to-date monthly report where it equals out. We share it with you, but just a few highlights for us.
Hi, everybody. How you doing tonight? So you got the year. Good.
I'm sorry, that was rhetorical.
Yes.
I also, my mistake.
Yes. No, I want to hear from each one of you about, you know,
That's good.
how things are going. Sean, we'll start with you. That's it. So you've got the year-to-date report that we give you that shows the month of December as a range and then the year-to-date as well. What we did do, Chris is going to put it up, but I put together a couple of slides just to give you some ideas and some things that we kind of watch and track as things go on. The biggest one that, you know, I've talked about multiple times is building maintenance. So what I thought I would highlight tonight is the heating of buildings function code, which includes heating fuel, the boilers and the control system. So you can see, obviously, fuel, we're in good shape because, you know, we just started buying heating oil and gas for heating the buildings in November. So we're in pretty good shape there. We did get locked in on heating oil at $3.29 a gallon, which is a pretty good price compared to what's out there right now. We are using this year diesel fuel as opposed to number 2 heating oil, just because it was cheaper and apparently works just as well. It was unfamiliar to us, but that's what we were advised to do, and it's working fine. The areas that I'm concerned about are the boilers, especially at Clough, where you can see we're already over budget, and the control systems at Nipmuc, Misco, and Clough are all over budget. At this point, we've had lots of problems with the, you know, computer systems that are running all of these systems, especially at Nipmuc, where it's a antiquated system that we can't get parts for. So we're just praying that it's going to make it through the next 2 or 3 years until we can upgrade it. The Clough one was actually put in relatively recently, but we've had lots of problems with it since it got put in. The exact same system was put in Memorial, works fine. So I don't know how to explain what the reasons are. But that's one area that I'm concerned about, you know, as the year goes on. Now, obviously, by the time we get to April, hopefully we'll be done using them. But if we continue to go this trend, it's not a good sign.
What's the problem that's costing the money? Is it bringing in maintenance?
Valves breaking, switches, the computer system at Clough, it just, the way they installed this new system is they put it on top of the old system and they don't seem to be compatible. So we keep trying different things to fix it. There aren't a lot of people that do this stuff. Ultimately, what needs to be done at all of the buildings is an entire new system needs to be brought in. We priced it out at this building about 3 years ago, and it was around $350,000 just for this building. Misco and Nipmuc run on what's called pneumatic systems, which means you've got little air hoses going through all the walls. All it takes is one little pinhole leak, and you've got to find that leak. Otherwise, a room is too hot, a room is too cold. Some teachers are here behind us here. I'm sure they'll talk about how their rooms are sometimes hot and sometimes cold, except Brian's room is always perfect. It's just the stuff is old, you know, and stuff breaks down. It always amazes me that, you know, you have your house and how often do you really have an issue with your boiler at home? Not that often. But we seem to every day something else is going on. Something is leaking, a pipe is leaking, you know, and especially at Misco. Misco is an old building. It has lots of things that can go. All right. Out-of-district tuition, just to give you an idea of where we're trending there. We have basically 3 types of out-of-district placements. Public schools, which means similar to Mendon-Upton, or we have a students, you know, students maybe are in Grafton or Holliston or Milford. That's a small category, but we're less than 50% and we're at the halfway point now. So I'm pretty confident we're in good shape there. The collaborative schools are public schools, but they're specific for special ed services. Again, we're in good shape. Private schools is where we have the largest amount, and it does look there like we're already 2/3, 3/4 of the way through our budget, but I haven't done the offset of circuit breaker yet, which is about $865,000. So I'm fairly confident that we're going to be in good shape there as well. We've had a couple more students that have aged out, graduated. So I think we're going to be okay as we get through the rest of the year, but that's another one that we watch on a regular basis. The last thing I'm going to talk about, because no year-to-date report is really complete in January unless I talk about snow and ice. So what we did with snow and ice here is what I tried to show you is over the last 5 years where we are as of the end of December as far as what we spent. So you can see it kind of varies, but we're right now, we spent a little under $5,000, and that's been kind of an average. We had a couple of anomalies. Like if you look at FY21, if you remember back, we had a fairly substantial snowstorm in December, a couple of them, I think. That's why. The other side there, you can kind of see what we actually spend over the course of the year. And yet again, you can see it varies. In FY15, we spent $220,000. That was a year we had some major storms, but last year we only spent 110. But you can see, well, we've only spent 4,500 now, or last year it was 4,500 as well, but we ended up getting to 110,000 by the time the year was done. And we didn't really, to me, I don't remember us having a lot of major snowstorms.
2015, we didn't have our first storm until
Yeah.
January 25th.
Yeah, but we had a ton.
We had a
And
ton.
I remember we had several large storms, that was back, we were having snow piling up. I remember putting snow up on the athletic fields just to get it out of the way because you couldn't see anywhere. Again, I think we budget pretty well for snow and ice. We try to plan for, not necessarily the worst. We don't budget 220,000, but we try to place a budget that covers us in case we have a bad year. And then if we don't, we have money that we can apply towards other things or that rolls in the ED at the end of the year. So those are the three I talked about now. Any
What made 2016 so cheap?
2016, it didn't snow.
We literally have stuff.
Yeah,
Okay, but we almost didn't, I guess we did have a little bit of stuff.
yeah, I quite honestly, I can't tell you that I remember every single year. I know that there were a couple of years back then when we had some fairly major storms, but no winter is completely without at least one blizzard, don't you think?
Pre-planned.
Pre-planned,
And we
right.
knew before.
Right, there's gonna be a major blizzard in 3 weeks. Otherwise Maureen is up all night trying to figure out what to do about the snow and the buses. Is there any other questions about anything else?
So what do we plan like 130, 100?
We budget more in the 160, 170 range. I try to, we've tried to set the budget based on what, we think is going to happen, but we want to be covered in case.
Sure.
Because the worst thing, like that $220,000 a year, I believe we budgeted about 180 that year. So now you've got to come up with 40,000 from somewhere else.
Yep.
And unfortunately, when it snows, you kind of have to clear the roads or the parking lots, whether you want to or not.
Yep.
Maureen says we can't have the kids climb through the snow to get into school. I think it would be fun. I don't have kids in school. Yeah, right. Rainy day challenge. Here's a shovel. How to get rid of the snow. It's like swing right through the doors.
Don't you have to be a higher up?
No, you. Any other questions? Anything else you might have seen in the year-to-date reports that I didn't talk about?
Nothing jumped out.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff.
I had another 85 slides, let me cut it down to 3.
Save it for Thursday night.
Yeah.
I actually really appreciate that summary. Well, that's really cool. Because honestly, dozens of pages was always a problem.
Yeah,
I
no.
know how emotional I am. Like every now and then.
And I got talk 360 wide.
You know, you have an icicle.
Yeah, I like those.
You know.
When I put them on, it was my first one.
So, right.
And I gotta get some. It's entertaining.
You guys make it the whole time. Excellent. Thanks, Chris. So thanks for having us today. I'm so thrilled actually to be with this group of fine people, Maria, Andrea, Brianna, Leah, and Ryan, who are gonna essentially help us understand how, the resources that the community is providing us with is actually used. And so I'm excited about this because we're all working really hard on this because it's a story that's best told from them. And it's a really important piece to some of the presentations that we've done so far this year that will kind of help put in context for the community, the way that some of these resources are used weekly and daily in classes. So I'll give a little bit of a context, but then I'm going to turn it right over to them. And I'll start just with showing a quote that we took from a recent Menti meter. This came from one of our educators. And I feel like it's a good way to kind of frame this presentation because it really speaks to the importance that our educators see in using data. And so the district has put significant resources into a number of data systems over the years. We've got iReady, we have Panorama, we have Thrively, and we want to make sure that folks know that we're using these data sources and we're using them regularly in very specific ways, not only to guide our instruction, but also to identify students for interventions. And that's what you're going to hear a little bit about today. So I've been a part of some presentations the last several months that focus on data. In November, I gave a little bit of an overview of district accountability. In December, Dave Quinn and I presented on some of the Panorama data, which is an SEL measure, if you recall. I figured we shifted a little today so that we could move away from like just focusing on the results, but to talk about how the data is used. And also I felt like that's good timing too, because we're getting ready for our diagnostic in iReady. And so what we'll be able to do is come back after that diagnostic is done and talk a little bit about those results, which are way more interesting to compare beginning of the year to middle of the year. And then maybe in the spring, follow up with some of the things that we've been doing through this S3 partnership, which we'll talk a little bit about today too. So this is like an activator slide to kind of make sure you remember some of the things we talk about a lot and why this is really important in this frame. We talk in this district a lot about MTSS. It's a framework for understanding how we do our work. And it's broken into 3 tiers. And you're going to hear these folks talk about how they use data to inform tier 1 instruction, which is the instruction that we do every day in every class, basically. And the importance of the data is that in order for us to be able to understand if we're doing a good job in our tier 1 classes, we need the data to be able to say, how are kids doing? And so we ask 2 main sets of questions when we are kind of approaching our year, and that's where are the kids starting? And also, how are we doing with this over time? So we utilize data in terms of benchmark or universal assessments. And you've heard talk about some of those. That's MCAS. iReady actually serves both as benchmark and a formative, as does DIBELS. And we have Panorama and Thrively, which we administer once a year. And one of the reasons that these assessments get put into the benchmark category is because they're asked of a whole group of kids. Okay, so they're not done to check in and see how folks are doing, although many of these tools have those applications as well. But the district has made commitment to apply them to grade levels or to schools or even K through 8 or more broadly, as the case may be. And in terms of some of the assessments that we're using for to answer the questions how we're doing, this is where you'll see us talk about the instruction in classrooms, tier 1, and also the interventions that we provide, which is tier 2 and tier 3. So I'm not going to stay on this very long, but because this is what these guys are going to talk to you about. They're going to talk to you about a process we call data inquiry. But I wanted to make sure, because we haven't talked about it together as a group, that you understand that it's a cycle and that it's a cycle that repeats. And what it really asks educators to do is it asks them to hypothesize in the class about their class and how the kids are doing in their class and what might be the reasons for areas in the data where we see we need to focus a little bit more. And then educators will create action plans to address that collaboratively. They'll implement these action plans and they'll identify assessments to see how it's going, and they'll do it again. And this cycle repeats itself to build a community among the teams to make sure that our instruction continues to improve and to make sure that we identify kids who may not be succeeding in the tier 1 environment. And iReady helps a lot in this, and they're going to talk a lot about iReady, so I wanted to just provide a couple of slides that kind of give the what for here. And iReady helps, first of all, because it really correlates well to MCAS. And so the graphics that I have here basically they were done in a report that we were a part of with data that was used from 2021. So it's not this year's data, but the point of the slide resonates. And that's there is a strong correlation between higher MCAS scores and I'm saying higher because that's where we are in the bright green, okay, and the higher iReady scores. And so you can see our school dots highlighted in the darker, and the clouds basically show you that there's a tight correlation. If there wasn't a tight correlation, the dots would be scattered all over the place, but it's a positive tight correlation.
What's the difference between the right and left data?
It's English, ELA and math. So it goes 3-4 ELA, 3-4 math. And I just pulled this out of the report as a example.
Okay, all right, so it's just mislabeled.
Did I mislabel it?
It doesn't.
Oh, that's because I forgot to switch it. Got that. All right. Another thing iReady does is it provides measures for different domains, which this I thought was important to highlight because it's not just about identifying it, how we're doing, in terms of getting our kids to proficiency on the MCAS. It's about why. Like, why are kids not succeeding in certain areas? And the iReady actually doesn't have the same standards or provide assessments in the same way that the MCAS does. And so sometimes people are like, well, then why is it useful? And it's useful because of that, actually, because it breaks things down into different areas where we can actually dig deeper and explore instructionally what we may or may what we might be able to think about that the MCAS doesn't provide us. Additionally, of course, we administer it multiple times. So it's unlike the MCAS where we just get one, we're going to see it again at the beginning of February and then again at the end of the year. Of course, it doesn't do everything. We need other assessments in between, and you'll hear about that here too. Thanks, Chris. And then finally, and this is something that I want to emphasize too, because this is kind of where we're at as a district right now. iReady has rich teacher resources, and they actually really help teachers think about things like how to group students for small groups, how to think about what instruction some students might need to be able to get to a certain grade level skill or focus for a lesson. And so what I pulled up is just screenshots of some of the places for both the ELA and math that, where teachers can go to kind of see these. And you'll see that sometimes the portal breaks students down into different categories to say, these students might need some extra support and here are some resources you could provide. And this is a map that kind of shows teachers some of the basic skills that kind of build to the grade level skill that they're working on. So I'm going to now turn it over to these guys and so that they can take you on a little bit of a trip through some of the things that we're doing in different schools. I brought folks from elementary and middle because that's where iReady is being used. You'll hear stories from ELA and math. And we'll start off with Maria and Andrea.
Thank you for having us here tonight. I'm Maria. This is Andrea. I'm the instructional coach. I'm working at Clough and Misco. And Andrea.
I teach fourth grade at Clough.
So I strong armed her into joining me today. So if you can go to the next slide. So as Cheryl mentioned earlier, data inquiry is a cycle. And so this is just like another way of looking at that cycle and what we've done as teachers in the school. So we start off with collaboration. And I know in Cheryl's slide, it was called hypothesize. So as a collaborative group or a team, we're working together to look at the data and then think about like,
what next steps we're going to make with that information. Where are the bright spots and where are their significant needs? And then we talk about that as a group and come together and develop a plan of action, or how we're going to maybe make some transitions in what we're doing in the classroom to help support students. And then start that plan of action and implement with different strategies, instructional strategies. And then in the end, after like working with that plan and doing several weeks or so of lessons, we evaluate. And those evaluations could be a formal evaluation like a quiz or a test, but they could also be through observations or discussions or small group interactions. And at the bottom of this slide, we included some information about teaching is to learn, because this whole process, the teachers are learning about the students, the teachers are learning from each other. They're bringing their strengths and their expertise together as a group to benefit each other as well as the students before them. So when you get a whole group of teachers talking about students, if they're in my class and Andrea is sharing really awesome strategies, my students are benefiting from what Andrea is doing in her class as well. So it's really a collaborative team process. And if you go to the next slide, okay, yep. Could you take that because I kind of skipped it.
So just I did sort of give a little more detail to what I was explaining in what we did with the fourth grade team. So we had taken some MCAS data and saw that students really struggled with main idea as a particular area. So we looked to find, Maria helped us find passages that we could use to help, and reading books that we could use to help in small groups focus on main idea. So we're explicitly teaching that comprehension skill of main idea in the small groups. And then we're able to informally assess them as they are, in small groups with us, but we're also, as a group creating, as a teacher team, creating little, informal assessments as well, things that the students can do to kind of prove that they understand what main idea is. And we're able to use the new iReady data to make new groups and able to see how students have been progressing with what we've been teaching them. Also, we were able to, they haven't talked about this yet, but some students who are getting a little extra support, more like in a tier 2, are also getting the assessment done again for them. It's the Fountas and Pinnell guided reading groups, the guided reading levels. They're having that redone. And so we can also then sometimes reassess students as well for some students who everyone had done at the beginning of the year. And then we're, going to redo it. And then at the end of the year for everybody, I believe. So anyway, we're able to use that assessment as well to make new reading groups or to see how they're doing with these new, the strategies that we're teaching them.
Thank you. So this slide just kind of shows you this in action. So we have collaboration, and you can see some pictures of staff meeting, and then some second grade teachers, the action or plan of instruction happening in different fourth grade classrooms and also in a second grade classroom. And then the assessment, the pictures there are more like informal assessment and small group observations and conversations. And this whole focus has been on literacy because that is where we really saw a need this year, and it also correlates with the strategic plans at the elementary school level. So, yeah. Thank you.
Should we do musical chairs?
Yes.
Oh, sure.
You can now.
I guess I'll sit. I stand at work all day, that's fine, but I'll sit.
Load up.
Yeah, let's rest.
Okay. Hi all, I'm Brian Labar, I teach 7th grade math at Misco Hill. According to Jay Byer, I have the best temperature room, I guess, at the school, but so what is that?
Whole district.
A whole district, wow, okay. So I'm just here to share a little bit about kind of how we're operating at the middle school in terms of using our data, using our resources to make sure we're doing what's best for children. So as I was trying to come up with a design as to how to represent this, I kind of like this idea of making sure it's known that we're not always starting at the same point. So for instance, the big 3 I kind of kept thinking of are, our MCAS results, our iReady results, and this term we started using in the last few months called street data, which really is basically what we're seeing on a day-to-day basis, whether it's throughout a whole class, whether it's an exit ticket, whether it's just, any data that we can collect on a regular basis to kind of assess and see, okay, I'm noticing this shift, I'm noticing this pattern. How can we make sure we're reaching all children? So, for instance, here you can see, we have our iReady scores on the left side, we have our MCAS data on the right side, and the street data, it's kind of just ranges from whatever we see. So if you go to the next slide, kind of how we started to triangulate it is, okay, so this is from a couple months ago when we received our MCAS results. So that's where we started with this one. So for instance, all right, let's go through the data, see compared to the state where we're at or what results we're seeing. And we noticed if those two standards on the left, we noticed that on the right, in the bottom right corner, there were very similar problems that related to how we're performing at these specific questions. So the math guy in me, I just go, okay, so what's going on here? I see this specific type of question that the same thing's kind of happening. So I started with the MCAS data, or we at 7th grade math, we started with the MCAS data and said, okay, so this is kind of our blank slate. This is kind of our ground level of where are we at? So sometimes it might be the street level data we start at. Sometimes it might be the iReady data we start at, but because we had just received the MCAS results, that's kind of where our ground level started with that. So from there, we then said, okay, what standards do these relate to, which you can see on the left. We said, okay, what are we seeing in the classroom? What are we seeing using that, matching it to that iReady data and kind of figuring out, okay, so this was clearly an area of not our greatest. So how can we make sure that our next go around, we're focusing on this, making sure it's not going to be the same thing again. So for instance, like I just said, we just looked at that data and basically from there, we identify where in our curriculum do we teach this subject, where in our curriculum do we feel maybe we need to switch it up a little bit. So we have those conversations. And then kind of like we were just saying, if you go to the next slide, we kind of have our action plan. So this is just a little snippet of our action plan, as in, I think on the left side, a little fairly obvious as to what we're doing is, okay, who is responsible and for what? Meaning, all right, if we're focusing on the standard, what's our plan for it, essentially? So we're gonna, all right, it's not written up there, but okay, so we're gonna address the standard, see maybe the previous year's standard as to maybe, is there a common theme? Like, okay, maybe this was a problem in 7th grade, was it also a problem in 6th grade? So we can make sure we can address the 6th grade problem before we address the 7th grade problem. The for how long is the one part I did add to it. So essentially, all right, let's put an assignment that relates to the 6th, 7th grade standard, review it, as a team, as a math department. The next week, review the results of the assignment. And then most important part is, okay, for those students that you can tell, no, still don't get the material, how can we make sure to meet their needs in a small group, however, we have win block at our school, so a what I need block. So then this kind of becomes that game of, okay, how can we make sure that we're meeting the needs of all the kids? Because there's a block that does get it, and then there's that block that we need the remediation. So we'll measure the impact, how will impact be measured, as in, or how will success be defined, as in, what percent do we deem that it's going well versus what, when do we realize that certain students need remediation. So overall, this is kind of our, I'm happy to be a part of Misco Hill in the sense that this is our really, these first few months, I'm really proud of everyone because we've really put together a really solid plan. It's our first full year, like really, all being on the same page in terms of we have this structure in place. And I'm really proud of everyone I've worked with because I think we're really setting ourselves up for success.
Thanks, Ryan.
No problem.
Can I ask a question or do you want me to wait till the end?
Whatever you
Go to the prefer.
Well, I stood up, so.
Stand.
Yeah, I'll get it.
This is awesome, by the way. I mean, I love the correlation between, just out of curiosity, as you're trying to go through this example, are there, like, when you get to an area, right, there's always going to be somewhere along the way, there's going to be the narrowing the process or whatever. but if you identify 4 or 5 areas that we didn't do as well in an MCAS, is there like aha moments that we're like, wow, the curriculum that we purchased actually never covered that? Or we think that that was covered the last week of June and the kids just didn't absorb it? Are there like examples you can use where of like the 4 or 5 skill sets that popped up in the MCAS, where you had a real like eye-opening moment? It's like, you know what, this was a problem, and we got this going forward. The next batch of kids won't fall, kind of into this pitfall.
Yeah, I would say there's moments like that every year. I would say,
I guess, can you give me an example?
yeah, I would say, for example, not as much as like the easiest answer is that we didn't get to it, because then that's like, oh, we didn't get to it. But no, but I would say it's more just, you realize based on seeing some of the results and like MCAS, for example, you see some of the questions they ask that you're like, oh, maybe what I thought the standard was saying, was a little different than what I really thought. And I think that's what happens a lot of times, is sometimes you read something and you see an example and you're like, oh, okay, I get the example.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden you kind of see the question slightly different on MCAS or slightly different on iReady, and you're like, oh, this is the avenue they're really kind of going down.
So our kids have the core skill set, but they're maybe just not used to the presentation that MCAS threw in.
That was my answer. Yes.
What you're raising is the important part of diagnosing in this cycle, right? Which is what these guys are great at, so they'll sit down together collaboratively and they'll diagnose, just like doctors diagnose health. They're sitting here diagnosing learning. And you can go to.
So we started off for the elementary level with just showing how we display some of our data. So if you look at the 3 pictures on the left is our data wall, a memorial for reading data from iReady. So if you look at the fall of 2021, that's where we started with each child has a sticky note with their initial and just their score, and it's color coded based on how the iReady color codes it. And then as we went through the year, we were able to move the stickies, and the teachers came in and did that for their own students, so they could kind of see how their students were progressing through the different benchmarks that they have. So I know it's kind of hard to see, but the yellow is below grade level, so like 1 year below grade level, and then the green right next to it is right on grade level, and the green on the far left is above grade level, mid to above. And so as you can see, we start with a handful of greens, a lot of yellows, and then throughout the year, we're able to see that growth, and we have the teachers actually moving it to really look at their classes and their individual students, which I think is really powerful for them to see. And again, we have access to it all electronically, of course, and teachers can see it. It's just kind of a nice tactile way for them to see and really get to see clusters of the grade and how the grade is doing overall, sometimes even the school as a whole building. And then, well, you can kind of jump, but
before you jump in,
you
guys introduce yourself.
Oh, it's not, sorry. We are the reading specialist.
I'm at Memorial.
And Brianna.
I'm at Cloud.
Sorry. Yeah. So, and then on the right is how Brianna is kind of keeping track of her data digitally, and I copied her. So I have something similar on the computer, but you can tell a little bit.
It's the same idea. It's a visual way of representing the student data, just the way that I have it. One row is one student. So obviously I wasn't going to share names, but if you look at a student, you're seeing the first 3 columns are from the DIBELS, which is one assessment that we use. The F and P stands for the Fountas and Pinnell reading assessment. And then there's the iReady data. So you can see sort of straight across, is a student scoring pretty much the same straight across, or are they red in some areas and green in others? So this shows, as much as I want tactile, I wish I had wall space for that. This is a way to sort of look at a big picture of like one particular student, but it's the same idea, the visualization of data.
Maybe that's just interesting. So if you look at like the spring data and you see the yellows all the way to the left, that means it started on the right is below, and then it
Yes. that specific child, yeah, so it's neat to see like some of those kids went to either at or above grade level on iReady, which is
Right.
significant growth, so, yeah.
So I just want to make a comment about this. This is when you're in like we're in like a process management class where you're constantly trying to improve like an industrial process or something like that. That's exactly what they do. Exactly. By process, so by kid, whatever. And the ability to go up for each person within the team that's analyzing that data to be able to go up and handle a piece of paper and move it to where they want or identify it as something important. That's exactly what they do. So I'm very impressed with this. This is really good. So I had another question as well. It's not on my mind. I wrote it down. So within the context of this, I'm wondering, so a lot of the data that we're using, and this is just from my own understanding, I'm not trying to put anything. A lot of the data that we're using, it's about the achievement or the scores that the students had in comparison to some past or
Like national benchmarks.
some sort of benchmark, state benchmark or whatever. And that usually deals with some sort of aptitude level that you measure or that those test makers are measuring. So I'm wondering if we've done anything to think about the level of work that the kids are doing relative to the grade they're getting. So instead of looking at this as an assessment type of measurement, look at this more as how much work, how much effort did it take for the kid to understand that material? And then that gives you an understanding of how much workload the kid can take on and whether we're pressuring the kid too much and whether we're putting it into a social emotional problem, which I've talked with Maureen about this so many times and over so many years, and it might just be my own observations about my own kids. So I have a sample size that's way too small. But the idea here is if you have a situation where, we can ask a kid, how many hours of homework do you have a night? And try to monitor that. The kids are going to give you their average assessment of how many hours that is. Whereas if you ask them, have you had any nights that keep you up past midnight? And how many? That's a completely different question. And they can tell you immediately how many times they've stayed up past midnight. They're very emotionally distraught about it. And the test is the next day. Maybe there's 2 or 3 in a row. And they do badly on that test. I can tell you. So is there any way to measure some of the other types of data? You're talking about street data. I applaud that. That's fantastic. Is there any other way to kind of codify what some of the measurements are in the street data that we have? And that kind of leads me into taking remediary actions that are more around scheduling time. And so that's just to give you an example. That's just.
So I have a couple of thoughts on that.
Yeah.
So as you can see, like kids as young as kindergarten are taking the iReady, right? And K through 8, I guess, but definitely at the younger levels, this test is done on the iPad, the whole thing. And a lot of times teachers will have the students work for 15 minutes to 30 minutes, and then they stop and they say, okay, we're done for today. We're going to move on to tomorrow. So they kind of chunk it in a way that they know is manageable for a kindergartner. We also, going along with that, when we look at the kindergarten fall data, we kind of know that, okay, some of these kids, this is their first time on the iPad ever, and they might have just clicked. And so now we're going to get a better picture once they've had more familiarity and they're in winter and they've used it a little bit. So that doesn't happen all the time, but especially for those younger grades, something like that can be helped because it is done in so many small sessions, so that say one day is just not a good day for a student. It might be okay because it might catch them up on the other days that they're able to do a little bit better. I also think that might be a good segue into the dibbles. Do we want to go to the next? Can you click to the
I
next
was just
slide?
gonna comment, I mean, like, or as an example of kindergartners coming in, really not knowing how to do certain things. We've found out a few times in the past, like they finished the entire iReady, and after the fact, we find out that their headphones weren't working. But they're 5 years old, they don't know that it's supposed to be talking to them, and they don't understand. So they do the whole thing without having heard any of it, and they're assuming that they have to be reading it themselves, when obviously we're not expecting that. But yeah, I mean, and the idea, I think what you're asking is, a lot about like the social emotional. And there might be ways to use like lively. I don't know a lot about that.
Yeah, well, when we're wrapping up, there's something that I'll try to weave in. That's actually something we're working on that I think addresses your question.
Excellent.
Well, I was just gonna say, this kind of jumps into the next thing. So we use the iReady data as benchmarks, beginning, middle, and end of the year. But for reading specifically, we also use the DIBBLES, which tests more of their phonological and phonics reading. And then we use reading assessments like Fountas and Pinnell and guided reading to test their comprehension. So those are kind of done in conjunction with the iReady, so that we can really tease out, is that iReady telling us accurate information? And then you can kind of go into what we actually do with all of that data once we have it.
Yeah, so the DIBBLES and the FNP or the guided reading are one-on-one. So you're sitting directly with the student. And I think that personal touch really makes a difference as well. But the DIBBLES is really focusing on phonics and phonemic awareness, some high frequency words. But we use the DIBBLES and then the reading assessment, where students will read a story at a certain level, and we do a running record, which is, how many errors are they making, how many times do they correct themselves, how many words are they reading in a minute, and then we ask them questions about it and have a conversation with them, and we determine what their instructional level is based on that assessment. And that is data that, like Andrea was saying, she uses it for like grouping kids. So in that tier 1, all kids in the classroom, teachers can still differentiate using that data to say, like, all right, these kids are all around the same level. I'm going to try and find a book that is a really great book at their level for practicing main idea and details. Or maybe next week we're going to be moving into making inferences. Let's try and find a book that they're at that level for making inferences. So that's just an example of another way we use it in tier 1. But then we also move into kind of our specialty is the tier 2 and tier 3 instruction. Obviously, as a district, we want all students to be in the classroom at all times, inclusion and really rich instruction happening where all students can get what they need. But ultimately, we know there are some kids who just are still going to be struggling and do still need that remediation and that small group support outside of the classroom, fewer distractions, and a very targeted curriculum. And so we use these additional assessments for deciding, Clough and Memorial both are qualifying for Title I this year. So we have tutors, amazing tutors. They are working with students that we've identified as struggling and in the classroom and not accessing their curriculum in that tier 1. So we're using those tutors for small groups, and they say, okay, based on the DIBBLES, these kids are really struggling with identifying long versus short vowel sounds. So we're going to do a 6-week cycle on really focusing on vowel sounds and making sure that they understand that. And then we assess again, we progress monitor and say, oh, this is really working. They're ready to move on to, vowel teams. And that's how we kind of use that in the smaller setting. And in addition to Title I, we have just regular academic tutors who do RTI. So they're maybe not 2 or more grade levels below, but we want to just give them the boost they need to be really performing on grade level so they can stay in the classroom. So we'll give them a little bit of extra support. So that's just another way that we're using this data. Teachers are part of this conversation, tutors are part of this conversation, really deciding what these kids are needing based on what we're seeing and giving them that.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you switch it one more time? You guys can just stay there. So I'll wrap it up, and I know we're way over time, so I'm going to wrap it up quickly and address the question that you raised to Sean. So here's what we're doing to support this work. First of all, there's incredible excitement, I feel like, all over the district around some of this stuff. We're working in teams. The work is happening regularly. We're developing protocols to help structure and guide the work so that it's systematic. That's one of the things I want to emphasize. And then we're providing coaching, we're providing PD, and
We're also involved in partnerships that really support the work, and S3 is one of these. So you were asking about, I'll phrase it as some of the other variables that might impact learning, and how do we get a picture of those variables and then kind of bring that data together, social emotional, maybe it's attendance, maybe it's other things like sleep or what have you, and get a good picture of why are students maybe struggling in one area or another. S3 is an academy that it stands for Systemic Student Supports. It's a partnership between the Rennie Center and Boston College. We were selected to be a partner of theirs. This is our first year in a 3-year partnership with them. They are helping every single one of our schools through a process of devising data that we think really informs, provides us with information on the whole child. And so tomorrow, actually, we've got our first district-wide session where each of the S3 teams will come together. We'll be having conversations about what those data points are going to be. And we're going to do it in a way that will be organized and be able to be consistent and passed from grade to grade and from school to school, so that there will be this ability to keep track of the data points that are important for kids and have that be longitudinal through their progress through the district. So that's exciting work. I think that we're just kind of starting with. It's just 3 months old, but already I think that we've had some great conversations, and I'll look forward to sharing them with you.
I have another question for the group of y'all. This kind of data analysis is time consuming. How is this fitting into teachers' days? Like, I can understand it's sort of a team planning concept that works, and you've got reading specialists and other specialists who can really deep dive into the data. Like, some of your slides here look like they would be really helpful for an individual teacher to say construct reading groups or to put together project groups. How are we finding time in the teacher's day that's protected and comfortable and doesn't place burdens in other areas for them to use that?
So there is time built into the schedule where teachers meet weekly for, I don't know, we call it the data block.
Yeah, it's a grade level meeting, but it's that time.
So once weekly, the grade levels get together and I will attend. Maria often attends, sometimes the principals attend, and that's an opportunity for us to look at data. We'll look at progress monitoring. But I know I also, like, if teachers want to use the data to meet groups, I have standing planning. So like, I meet with a first grade teacher on Fridays before school, the third grade teacher Wednesdays after school. And that's a time when, if we want to look more closely at their class, that's a time when we can say, like, all right, let's shift these groups a little bit. This kid's making some progress, and we can move them into this group, like that kind of stuff. But there is time built into the day dedicated to that. In addition, they still get their prep.
I'm just thinking, like, I work in a middle school, and I know that there's prep time and there's times built into teacher's day, but then there's a meeting that has to happen and an IEP that they have to go to, and things pull people in different directions. And I'm just curious to know, because it sounds like there's some excitement, there's some really good work being done. What kinds of things are happening to protect that time, and teachers feel like that time is being protected before time?
I feel like our school is pretty good at trying to plan IEP meetings around those times whenever possible. Like, it's built into the schedule that the teachers have that time. So whenever possible, we do avoid any other meetings occurring. Of course, things happen, but.
Yeah, and I would also say from middle school standpoint, I feel like it's more of a documentation thing going on now versus, I think a lot of the stuff we're doing, to some extent, we had already been doing. It just hadn't been, you can sit around with your 5 colleagues and kind of discuss it, and you kind of all agree to something. And then 900,000 other things happen during the day, and you kind of come back to it and you're like, okay, where did we leave off? Versus now I feel we have kind of a structured template where it's another thing, but it's stuff I feel like we've already been doing. It's just now, okay, let's revisit this, and we all kind of center back in on it. So from being teaching 7th grade, that's where I feel like we're kind of out with it.
Becoming systematic.
The other piece to it too is we have this time to do it, then like we need this information, like we use it. So it's not like it's just, oh yeah, like yeah, we need to make more time for that, like, okay, what else do we need to, you know what I mean? So it's like we need the information, so it's like also sometimes during a planning time, you're like, we should probably look back at that, it just kind of ends up flowing because it's important to us too, to move forward.
Coming as an outsider into the district, I would say that,
Join the crowd. Don't be an outsider.
has done a very nice job protecting time for their teachers for this kind of work. They have prep time that is devoted to prepping, and then they have this time that's devoted to talking about this kind of work, which is really nice and one of the reasons I came. So.
All right, well, I just want to say thank you to all of you again, and thanks for having us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Right, we're on to new business. Jen and Nick, you're gonna walk us through the budget presentation for this government.
Wait. Okay.
Thank
All right. It's exciting to have an opportunity to talk to you about our budget because we love looking at our return on investment side, so we're looking forward to getting to that one. We chose this quote because we feel that we work in a research-based profession and know that the resources needed to do this work, the important work that we do, evolve as we learn and grow ourselves. So like the budget process plays a big role in making sure that we are able to best teach people how to learn. Our budget prioritization process mirrored the other schools in terms of we have department chairs at NISCO and monthly grade level leaders. So with the support of those people, we were able to capture priorities by department and grade span. And then propose those to Jay and Maureen and make sure that they align with district and strategic goals as well. And one of the things I'm really grateful for in terms of Maureen's process is she really allows the time and the space for our thinking to evolve and grow and change at different stages along the way in terms of the work that we're doing and respecting our decisions around what we need at NISCO, but also collaboration with the leadership team and hearing and learning from each other and feeding off of each other's process. So I really value that process. Thank you. So in terms of our return on investments from last year, we added a grade 5 teacher, thank goodness. So that has allowed for average class sizes of around 25, but we do have a couple that are 28, 29, and that's because we had 10 unanticipated enrollments since the start of the school year. So if we hadn't added that person, we'd be in looking at low 30s for class sizes in some of these. A piece of that is because we have a robust Spanish immersion program. So we have 2 sections of Spanish immersion in 5th grade, which means that teacher can only teach in Spanish. And that causes other classes to bubble up when they're taught in English. So that has been hugely impactful, more than we ever could have anticipated, because what we're finding is post-COVID, the needs have changed. And I can't imagine meeting the needs of our learners with class sizes of 30 or 30s. It's really challenging with class sizes that we have now. So that's been hugely impactful. We added a second wellness teacher, which is exciting. That means that now each student at NISCO takes a semester of wellness and a semester of PE each year, rather than splitting that in a term. So they doubled basically the number of classes they get. And you know that in terms of social emotional learning and mindfulness and well-being, those classes are so vital to the work we do, especially at the middle school level. So that's been outstanding. Our media clerk, as of 12/21, we had 658 books that had been checked out, and I wrote and checked back in, which is always great. So it's really nice to see things back in circulation of the NISCO library and back in the hands of our students and staff. And our lower gym floor has become a safer place to play and a point of pride. I wish you could have all seen our faces when we walked in the school this year, because it was just magical to see everybody's reaction and to see the kids know that they were valued and feel proud of their middle school space.
What does it look like?
Shiny and
Yeah.
Take down on tomorrow.
So it's wooden as well?
Yeah,
No more speed bump.
giant jumbotron, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
We got there.
Golf course, you know
exactly
where they're cracked.
Yeah.
The kids jump. Some of them use that speed bump to their advantage.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We also want to highlight some of the reductions, efficiencies, savings and grants that we were able to incorporate this past year. As an educator, it's by nature to be resourceful and opportunistic. So we took a strategic lens to our schedule. We were able to reorganize our sections into maximizing special ed support. As part of this process, we were able to create co-taught social studies and co-taught science at 7th and 8th grade levels, thereby reducing the need of para support in 7th grade and 8th grade. And we were also able to continue our partnership with wonderful organizations like MUF and PBL Works to fund some of the initiatives that we have here at MISCO. Recently with MUF, we were able to continue our academic and social emotional learning with our students through the purchase of colorblind glasses for art class. So these glasses not only provided support for students who are colorblind, but also built empathy in those who are not. So in turn, helping us create more mindful learners and global citizens at MISCO. And we are in our first year of our PBL partnership with PBL Works. We've had about 40% of our staff trained in project-based learning here at MISCO. Jen's going to talk a little bit more about the impact it has had on student learning, but we are very appreciative of the grant that we were able to participate in with PBL Works, because not only does it train our teachers, it trains our leadership team so that we have the trainer-train model. So any other future staff members that join MISCO will be able to create those supports so that we can sustain this program.
Next up is my favorite slide. I love talking about the strengths. And I use teeny tiny font and the list still got long. So of course, this is just a sampling of some of the many strengths at MISCO, but we use the understand, support, and engage framework to highlight some of the things that we're most proud of. So in addition to our talented staff and supportive families and awesome students, we find that we are, as you heard in the previous presentation, really expanding the skilled and consistent use of data inquiry cycles. I feel like our staff has come a long way in a short amount of time, and we're really excited about how much they're digging in, supporting their learning, and are curious in terms of their own, and really trying to have an impact on kids through that. In terms of supporting, we are now able to use data to create flexible groupings during wind block to provide enrichment, extension, intervention. We're able to use it for social emotional learning needs because we have data around areas to pinpoint and identify. So that's been exciting. In terms of engaging, some of the information, we have Project Lead the Way and project-based learning and so many programs in terms of after school and during school. But a little bit about the project-based learning unit. So we're a little ahead of our goal, and the goal for next year is that 100% of our students will have experience too. Dave Quinn supported people who have taken PBL 101 in our last, we did a split in our last staff meeting in terms of how to provide authentic audience and get authentic feedback through the use of Pathful, which used to be Nepress. So we feel like in terms of engaging high quality instruction, that effort has really allowed us to take a total. And the work that we've done so far is what has allowed us to target the work that needs to happen next. So building on that, we know next steps at MISCO are going to be looking at our assessment design, and does it give us the data and feedback around student progress that we want it to and need it to? And does it allow us to provide students with actionable feedback so that they know what to do more of and how to shift and really grow those skills. In terms of supporting, we've done a lot of work around calibrating our communication in terms of reporting grades through the more technical use of PowerSchool And next steps for us are really looking at grading as a communication in terms of progress monitoring, in terms of content acquisition and skills development. And then we have the oldest, our favorite building in the district. So we know there's always a need for improvement around facilities so that we a great place to work and learn. So we really appreciate, right now, we have a great volunteer group offering their time and talents looking at the athletic fields. We know the work that Misco has done. We've put in some short and long-term ideas. And we also know in terms of engagement, we are looking at, because of our data, this came out of a lot of our street level data conversations, our instruction of writing and what do we need to fine tune both adult skills and student skills. So that's something we're looking to support through professional development. So we make sure we're engaging students in research-based high quality instructional practices around writing. That brings us up to the asks. Your favorite part. So we kind of broke it down into categories. So we did a lot of work around prioritizing, and it's always challenging because everything seems important when it comes to what's best for our kids. But we really feel like the addition of a 6th grade social studies teacher will allow us to not have the same concerns we had in 5th grade this year or 6th grade next year. We'll have 2 Spanish immersion sections next year in 6th grade. We will have, we're up to about 170 students currently in 5th grade. So without any move-ins, that's where we are with the 2 SI sections pulling out and bubbling up classes. And we really believe in the middle school model, and that will allow us to go back to balanced teaming. So we have somebody content specific in each team. We know the reason we team is for those relationships. Try to really increase student to teacher ratios, trying to really make that social emotional attribute in terms of learning, so that kids have somebody they feel they connect to. So we like those teaming models and feel like that addition of another person would be great. And the last piece of that is that we have 1 6th grade team where teachers are teaching 2 content areas, and that's an anomaly throughout the rest of the building. So we would like to get it back so that people are teaching what they're passionate about and enthusiastic about. So the kids are getting that kind of focused deep instruction. It impacts teachers' common planning time to teach 2 content areas because they meet once per cycle with their curriculum partner. So they have to split their time. So they're actually meeting every other cycle with their curriculum partner. So we know that based on the work that we are trying to do and achieve, that adds a degree of difficulty as well. So I feel like that 6th grade social studies teacher position is an important one. We had an exciting opportunity in 7th and 8th grade this year because of student service delivery grids and the staffing that we had. We were able to create 2 a section of science and a section of social studies at each grade level that's supported by the special ed teacher rather than the para-educator. So for our students who are demonstrating 2 proficiency levels, 2 or more grade levels behind their peers, it really softened that leap to going from either a small group instructional or co-taught to just a para-supported. So we're finding feedback from families has been really strong and positive. The growth in students has been really strong and positive, and a lot of sharing of high quality instructional practices being developed there. So we'd love to see that model in 5th and 6th as well. So that would require an additional special educator at each grade level. In terms of program enhancement, it's awesome that we're seeing books flowing in and out of the library again, but we would love to be able to create a robust elective that utilizes that space and potentially our Inspired Innovation Center in terms of makerspace. So we would love to see a licensed person in that role so that we could put that into student schedules and really have additional offerings, because we know our electives are so important to our well-rounded educating approach in the middle school. And in terms of instruction, not until Maria arrived on the scene, she's gone now, I sort of call her my fairy godmother, fairy godparent, did I realize how much, and Cheryl's been instrumental, how much we were doing it as best we could in terms of supporting instruction at Misco and attending teachers' common planning time and trying to be their instructional coaches. So it's incredible to have, Cheryl's very committed to attending as much of our strategic planning time and curriculum planning time as she can. Maria comes and attends faithfully now with our 5th grade teams. And that consistency is so important to driving the growth of the adults and the students. So because of the nature of our roles, the intent is often there and we often get pulled to do something else. And what you find is you get these gaps in people's learning. So we don't want to have to miss a cycle and then not connect with staff again, because then there's a half day on their meeting and then there's a snow day and then it's a month has gone by before we've reconnected with that work. So I think we're fine tuning all of our systems and realizing our systems would operate better with more support. So to have an instructional coach in the humanities and an instructional coach for STEM who can work 5 through 8 instead of just K to 5, we think would be instrumental to the growth of our student learning. And to our teachers in terms of practice. I think that's it for me.
So on that chart, is that in terms of priority?
Sort of, Sean. I like that you asked that question. It started out that way. So we feel like our social studies piece is really top priority. It's hard to, and one of the things, the instructional coaching piece was part of our evolution in our work. I think in one of our leadership conversations, I heard conversation and we shared conversations. And I said, I think out loud, I wish I had put in for instructional coaches this year in MISCO. I put it in short term or subsequent. And Maureen said, if you think that's what's best for kids, put it in there. So we did. And then it's always, you don't want this list to get too long.
Yep.
Because something about something. So it's a tough, when we look at these other positions, it's a tough choice. Thanks for asking.
And so we just wanted to map out from staffing, facilities, and PD resources what we're thinking to bring to MISCO to further support the students and adults in our building. From a staffing perspective, in the short term, we're always looking to for tier 3 level support, and then in the long term, we're also looking. One of our dreams is to diversify our world language offerings and bring in American Sign Language to MISCO. And eventually down the road, we see that some of the class numbers are higher in early elementary. So preparing for that baby boom to hit MISCO and for us to plan accordingly for class sizes in 5th grade. We know that we'll be in need for a grade 5 teacher. We're thinking, I think that grade is somewhere in grade 1 right now, grade 2. In terms of our numbers, in terms of our building, we are the oldest building in the district, but it's most loved. So there's always going to be areas, both in the short term and the long term, that we're going to want to focus on. And so in the short term, we've identified the auditorium stage floor. And as Jen has mentioned, the grounds. And then, as you could see, a couple other areas in the long term as well. And then PD resources, as Cheryl and the team identified under the big umbrella of NTSS, we have a lot of different focuses so that we are fully supporting the whole child here at MISCO. And these are things that we're currently providing for our staff, but we know that in order to become proficient, it's going to be a long-term endeavor and commitment, and always looking for not only internal offerings, but external offerings to continue our own learning as well in these areas.
That's it. Our presentation. We'd love to answer any questions that you have. Thank you for listening so exactly.
Really appreciate it.
So what's for the incoming 5th graders, the 4th graders, what's the differential between class size, the added a 5th grade teacher? So
they're at 163 right now if you combine the 2 schools. So we're at 170 right now in our 5th grade and have those big bubble classes. So we anticipate it. I haven't had a year of this way yet, but we haven't had some move-ins in the summer, so anticipate it would be.
Yeah. And we'll have 2 sections of Spanish immersion next year in 5th grade as well.
Thank you.
How big are the Spanish immersion classes?
I think we're in like the 18, 19.
18 for 5th grade moving into 6th grade. Both sections are 18, and then 4th grade moving into 5th grade is also, I think, 17 each. So just large enough that we can't combine them into one section, but small enough that it causes other sections to bubble up to 28, 29.
And Misco's a funny place. We have a variety of classroom sizes. Sometimes when you get in that low 30 range, it kind of limits what you can do instructionally as well, because we thought about if we just make a section of 32 and have a really challenging year. Whatever the number is, 36, depending where they are, but it just it's makes more sense to split them, especially developmentally.
Is the library position, would that be incremental or would that be up leveling that position?
It would be up leveling, so I think the media clerk would offset some of it because we would no longer need.
So I guess that would be,
piece,
so
but,
accounting would be full cost.
yeah, be a licensed educator. Yeah. My understanding, Eric, is for the person to design and implement instruction and assess and offer grades, they need to get licensed educator.
Yeah, so, and especially if you're gonna put some elective classes, right? Person responsible for grades. You can add to those.
Yeah.
Again, one of the questions you mentioned is you're going through the co-teaching, the special education. Did we add that a few years ago for grades 7 and 8?
We had some changeover in staffing, so we had our small group numbers are diminishing each year, which I think is a great thing in a lot of ways. So because we didn't have the need for small group, we were able to push some of the staffing into co-taught. And it really ended up in 7th grade just because of service delivery grids. So if you look at the cohort of kids who need service, the service they needed was co-taught. Small
Person breakup, okay.
yeah. So if that trend continues, that'd be fantastic.
Right.
You know, we might be able to do it with what we have and push things around, but it'd be really nice to be able to perpetuate that model and sustain it.
And also allowed our special ed teachers, instead of teaching both math or English and pushing in for support in both sections, they were able to focus on one particular domain. So our 7th grade special ed English teacher taught 2 sections of special ed English, 1 section of small group English, and then was able to assist that group of students in their social studies class as a co-taught class.
So again, it comes back to it's a really nice model for co-planning with their co-teacher, because they're co-planning with one person instead of trying to do it with 2. Feels luxurious.
Yeah.
Impactful.
My only other comment that I'll make is I think it'd be interesting, and Jay, I think we have this day or Maureen, like just, and I know we saw it last year, but it's just, if we took, Clock Plus Memorial, what's kindergarten look like, what's K, grade 1. Right? I know you guys have a couple of years of single thread side coming up. Right? So that's going to change things up for you. Because I think your 4th graders coming up as 2 classes. The grade behind them, I think, is single thread. But how do we start putting a long range lens on some of these things?
Because it is challenging for our 5th grade teachers because they never know what their schedule is going to be and who they're going to be teamed with.
Sure.
So we're dependent Spanish immersions. Yep. We've talked about that a lot. There's a way to forecast and consistent.
Great. Any other questions? Great. Thank you both.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. I guess we're on school committee subjects. So no update or no policy committee meetings since we've met last as a group. All right. Budget subcommittee has been rescheduled from January 4th to this Thursday, the 12th, 5 to 6:30. So update there. And then the school committee goals we will wrap up this week. Promise morning, I will chase Phil down. And are there any other matters not anticipated by the committee the last 48 hours? In the agenda? All right. I don't have any correspondence to share. Anybody else? Okay. And so some of our future agenda items, we've got the other department budgets that Maureen mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. We've got the mid-year progress on district goals coming up. And then we'll be reviewing next year's school calendar. All right, if there's nothing else, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
Meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous, great, and we are